We will not comply with the institution's sick illusion. No, it won't be televised. Welcome to the revolution.
Welcome on in, everyone. We are going to do a special video here that will be podcast style so that I can get it out sooner to you. And it's covering the United States astrology over the next 6 months from June, July, roughly, of 2022 to December of 2022. And we're going to cover the themes of housing relocation, basically fourth house activities that are going on. And we will cover themes of mental, physical fog going on, having to do with Mercury, Neptune, also themes of death, darkness, drama, sorry to say, with Black Moon Lilith moving into the 8th house in Cancer, and global warfare with Mars and Gemini in the 7th earlier on in this year. And finally, intense shift of values with the United States going into its Pluto return. Remember, we've already had this in the first half of this year, February 20th to be exact. So we're going to get parts 2 and 3 in the second half of this year. Now, before I get into these themes, these transits, let me say that because this is podcast style, occasionally I may throw up a visual here for you. But for the most part, if you want to put on your earbuds and, go on a commute, get some chores done, run some errands, whatever, to make this most productive, then absolutely do so. And if you're not at a time, to do that, maybe put me on your watch later playlist and watch me later. Or just stay with me now, whatever works for you. Let me say real quick that my daughter, Brianna August, she helped me with the astrology research for this video. And so if you want to check her out, she is over on Instagram and TikTok at Brianna August Art. And not only does she do art, she does astrology readings. So yeah, if you want to check her out, please visit her on her social media. Now, before we get into these major themes and these transits that I mentioned, let's just get out of the way some givens with the astrology. First off, we have Pluto in Capricorn in the second house of the United States. And so what this means is that we as a nation are dealing with a massive transformation going on in our financial condition, having to do with our money supply, assets, wealth. It is intense. And that too is causing us to change our values. At times, it may cause us to question our own self-worth. The country's finances are changing, and we know with what's been going on with the World Economic Forum, the Great Reset, it's all part of that plan. And so this is going to affect wages, currency, the banking and financial industry, and practices. Banking and financial practices are changing. This is affecting the stock market when we're talking about the second house. And with this being in the sign of Capricorn, some very important decisions are being made by people in very high, lofty places. That is affecting business practices, governance. And with the sign of Pluto here at play, this is definitely affecting mega corporations with monopolistic powers. It's affecting overseas transport, including airlines and shipping. It's also impacting the tourism industry. The dark side of this is, that Pluto can bring in these energies having to do with black market economies rising up, international crime syndicates, corruption happening at a global level, and also misinformation. Now, moving into our third house in the U.S.'s natal chart, we've got Saturn and Aquarius and Pisces and Neptune. The third house has a lot to do with communications and transportation and neighboring countries. So, it's no wonder why we're seeing a lot of amped up talk about the shipping industry, what's going on with supply chain, what's going on with censorship. This is affecting business communications, all kinds of communications, even cell phones, computers, the educational arena. It's impacting literary work and intellectual property. What's happening in this third house is also impacting writers, journalists, people who are delivering messages, transporting goods. It is a house where we can see rumors, information wars. And most definitely, when you're looking at Saturn and Aquarius, where the authorities are putting a squeeze on humanity at large, and you're looking at Pisces and Neptune, where the beliefs and ideals are not real clear. Neptune has a lot to do, by the way, with the media and disinformation. It's showing us where we might be giving up too easily, might be martyring ourselves, making ourselves easy prey to deception. How we can get easily fooled. Well, it has to do with these third house communications, transportation issues. And maybe what's running us amok is the technology, the algorithms, the bots. And it would have to do with, when we're talking about Saturn and Aquarius, human rights issues, altruistic endeavors. But with Saturn on Aquarius in that third house, this is really impacting the people, the commoners. It is impacting the economy, the consumers. And where Saturn is also showing us where we want to get some relief, where it is that we are being restricted. So in the third house, definitely with Neptune there as well, it is very likely that we are looking at a time of scarcity issues being confused, unemployment issues being confused, poverty, profits, all of this being confused as to why the common person is having the squeeze put on them. And part of this confusion and conflation is having to do with inflation, with corporations, the stock market, the pharmaceutical industries. These are, industries that are going to come into the conversation anytime you bring up Neptune. So be careful what you're hearing in the news and in the media about these major corporations that are on the stock exchange. Be careful of these multinational corporations and investors, these institutional investors. What you're hearing about Big Pharma, what you're hearing about the fentanyl crisis at the border and in the United States. Because what you see is not what you get with Neptune and Pisces. And the same with oil and gas. Oil and gas is another industry that would fall under Neptunian influence. And part of the deception here is likely having to do with idealism. People trying to get rich quick. Yes, maybe off of the stock market. Maybe off of manufacturing scarcity. Definitely with Saturn and Aquarius nearby in that same house. Be careful. Are the shortages legit or have they been created to cause inflation, to cause prices to go up? And you can't see that clearly because you don't know with Pisces and Neptune what is really going on. Or maybe you're being sold some great dream that, we've got to go rescue some people in another country that we actually do not know what the hell's going on over there. But let's go help them. And that's why, because some boogeyman out in another country is raping and pillaging foreigners in a foreign land over issues we don't even know about. Neptune. Watch out. Saturn is a lot about governance. Neptune, you ain't getting the truth. Beware. And third house in communications, you better research, okay? Moving on to, fourth house, what's going on with, an area of life having to do with the homeland, home, family, sense of belonging, okay, and support systems, okay? And this is also affecting company employees, the farming industry, food, agriculture, weather events as well, natural resources. This is our country's land and territories, the housing sector, real estate, right? All of these types of issues are impacting fourth house. Well, we've got Jupiter there, which can be very benefic, very fortunate and blessing. However, it can also expand things that are not so fabulous. And something that's not so fabulous going on in the fourth house is Chiron and Aries. Where, and by the way, it's a Chiron return for the United States, where we're having to revisit this woundedness that the nation has surrounding its identity, its self-worth issues, definitely being triggered by Pluto in Capricorn in that second house that I mentioned earlier. So Jupiter is really putting a magnifying lens on this Aries energy of, individual liberty, individuality, which this country was founded on, sovereignty, freedom. Yeah, it's that don't tread on me vibe, okay? But there's some woundedness around that is being amplified with Jupiter. And again, Jupiter might bring this financial system issue into focus, looking at how businesses are profiting, how wealth is made and distributed, who's prospering right now, who's not, and why. Looking at the growth of the economy. Looking at higher prices in the fourth house having to do with higher rent. People getting into mortgages that they cannot afford because of the housing bubble that has been building over the last 2 years. And now inflation, where they are going to start losing their homes. We are going to start dealing with eviction because they're getting priced out. That's a whole nother topic. I'll go deeper into that very shortly. But let me just say, people are really having to look at, how do I get my expansion? How do I grow generational wealth? For the middle class, it has largely historically been through home ownership. But oh, wait a second. Chiron is in there, bringing up something very painful in terms of this. And I suspect it has to do with rising prices, Jupiter in fourth house. And yes, when we're looking at Aries, it probably may have something to do with what's going on with the warfare. Sometimes Aries can have to do with manufacturing as well. But, all of the United States manufacturing has been moved over to China. That started in the late 70s, was in full effect during the 80s. We have effectively been gutted. We need to bring our manufacturing home, okay? And by the way, I've recently heard somebody say, why is it that over 90% of America's pharmaceuticals are produced in China, our biggest enemy in terms of warfare? So there might be, I'm just now seeing as I'm looking at this further, and Chiron there with it, about being healing and manufacturing and military. That is something I didn't see previously, but we're dealing with Jupiter and Aries in that fourth house for the majority of the second half of the year. So watch out for this possibly to come up as an issue. Of course, I'm seeing most of the warfare in this area tied to economic warfare through inflation, overpriced housing, institutional investor buying up all of these properties, creating manufactured scarcity, and so on. Moving on to the fifth house, we have Uranus and Taurus, which is bringing a lot of instability in terms of finding stability, getting strength, financially, monetarily, and yes, it is affecting the banking industry. Uranus is also impacting trade unions, technology like the mobile devices, the smartphones, apps, electricity. And so we know that what's going on right now with the Build Back Better agenda and the green, agenda, that they're trying to get us on electric cars and get us off of gas. And I'm definitely seeing with Saturn and Aquarius in the third house, they are putting the squeeze on. It's there. However, with Uranus in Taurus, this hasn't leveled out yet, and it won't for years. There will likely be radical developments with this. There will probably be some kind of reforms or change going on with this, inventions. However, this is in flux. This has not stabled out. This idea that we can just go completely off of our gas supply onto electric, it ain't ready yet. Poor planning, poor execution. Even if it is a grand old idea, which arguably it's not. And I am hearing talk lately about ethanol and Biden trying to push ethanol as an alternative to gas. But guess what? There are people out there saying that is not good for the environment either. So guess what? We don't have this figured out. And when we're talking about the fifth house, we're looking at risky ventures. We're looking at speculation, speculative markets. Yeah, maybe people are trying to get into making plans for producing products and developing these markets and getting money and resources for going green and the green agenda. But I'm also seeing an influence here of there being some unpredictability having to do with pleasure, children, fun. I am also seeing that in terms of the stock market, it's going to be very unpredictable for the remainder of the year. You just do not know what you're going to get with Uranus there in Taurus having to do with money, fifth house having to do with speculation, risk, gambling. And also, this might have to do with celebrities, and we might see some random people like we recently saw Matthew McConaughey. We've been seeing people Like Justin Bieber just came out in the news. Oh, that's a whole nother topic. But Johnny Depp, Amber Heard, the whole thing with Chris Rock and, Jada and Will Smith. Okay, we are going to see these different celebrity stories randomly being popped up into the narrative as weapons of mass distraction out of nowhere. Just be aware that there's a lot of randomness when we're looking at Uranus in the 5th house. Now, during this year, the North Node is also going to be in Taurus in the 5th house and into the 6th house. So more of this as a nation feeling like we have got to stabilize something that is not stable. And it might have to do with creative ventures, taking risks. It might have to do with children, population growth, the birth rate, which is in decline here in the United States, despite all of our media, Pisces and Neptune in the 3rd house, along with Saturn and Aquarius, right? Despite all our media trying to tell us, to keep our numbers down and launching all kinds of different campaigns that oddly all come up with the same outcome, which is lowered population. Well, the population here is not looking good, actually. We are in decline as a nation. And recently, there have been some people who have come out talking about that. So this might be an issue that comes to the forefront. Nevertheless, when the North Node moves into the 6th house, there might be more of a focus away from these matters of population growth and pleasure seeking and taking risks into how am I going to be of service? It has to do more with the working environment. And yes, putting more of a focus on the medical field and rendering support for military. Issues of work ethics could become, more of a focus, and working conditions. Also, stored crops, grocery stores, eating habits, things like that could become more of a focus. Industries that are impacted by these things, like the restaurant industry, public servants, the medical industry, and everything tied right to the medical field, like sickness, doctors, pharmacies, chemicals, is all related to the 6th house stuff. And with the North Node in Taurus there, it's like, we've got to focus on the mundane aspects of life. Like what is going on with the police, the firemen, the military. I recently heard a report that there is a police department, I think in Minnesota or Michigan, that has issued a public statement saying we're trying to police by phone because we cannot afford the gas to make house calls. Imagine that. So this could be a time when people are going on strike, or, workers, or, people who've got the boots on the ground, so to speak, are basically more or less going on strike, saying we can't do this. We don't have the resources to do this. And finally, I want to mention that Lilith and Ceres are going to be in Cancer. For Lilith is going to be in the 7th house and 8th house this year, Ceres in the 8th house. So during those times, a lot of anger having to do with foreign policy, international affairs, relations with the international community. Yes, probably people getting pissed off about the World Economic Forum and their installed puppets as people are waking up to this. People starting to realize that these military adventures, these foreign entanglements, are not for the official reasons. We go back to Pisces and Neptune in the 3rd house. Yeah, people are getting angry about it because 8th house is a lot about shared resources. And when we're talking about, 7th house is looking at overseas stuff going on overseas, war disputes. I'm hearing international treaties, okay? And if this is not about the military, this is about these global corporations. And so when you add Lilith into the 8th house, you bring that into the mix. 8th house has a lot to do with the death rate, debt, public spending, taxes, and also looking at revenue. How is money being used? The taxpayers' dollars. How is it being used for the public that they are elected to serve? Are they using American tax dollars to finance ventures in other countries? It's like misappropriation of shared resources. Like, no, that's not for you. That's for us, not for you to go use with somebody else. So I also see with the 8th house people examining the amount of debt within the system because of foreign aid, because of foreign entanglements, because of corporate welfare, these government subsidies and these tax write-offs and loopholes that are being given to the Jeff Bezos of the world, of Amazon, right? Other industries that might come up for view with this that might spark some anger is the insurance industry. For example, there have been some reports of insurance companies refusing to pay out life insurance policies for people who had the experimental, over the last 2 years. And we do have reports of higher death rates. And I got to say that because we're talking about 8th house, right? I can't go too deep into that over here because, it's right. We're back to Saturn and Aquarius in the 3rd house, the censorship that's going on, Pisces and Neptune, disinformation, misinformation, right? But by the way, if you want my censored content that I can't put over here, you can go follow me over on BitChute and Odyssey for that. And it's free. And if you go over there, you're helping to build platforms that are doing the right thing and protecting free speech in America. I'm also seeing with this 8th house, it is impacting Social Security, pensions, Medicare. We are probably going to see more talk about this, and UBI, stimulus, more discussion of that. Again, shared resources, particularly I think as we get closer into the end of the summertime and we get into some astrology that really starts getting people worked up. I mean, I don't know if you've seen, but there have been a lot. Like when I log on to Twitter every day now, I'm seeing video footage of people engaging in violence and attacking their fellow Americans over nothing, completely unprovoked. And I think we're going to be seeing more of this, particularly in the bigger cities, as we're seeing the effects of the economic warfare, and they have us turning on each other for resources, people getting very desperate, and you will see others probably saying, hey, we need to bring in UBI, more stimulus, whatever. And with the 8th house, this is likely affecting mayors, governors. We will probably see more engagement with that. If you were in another country, I'd say, 8th house is, maybe prime ministers and their cabinets or premiers. But, here in the United States, we're talking about mayors and governors at the city and state, local level. Basically, you're going to see more people trying to figure out on a local level what do they need to do to bring about change in the way their resources, their local taxes and their state taxes are being redistributed, trying to get more control. And I see a lot of anger and outbursts around this at those levels. Now let's talk about the themes that I mentioned earlier, starting with the housing and relocation issues. I do feel like this year what's going on with the 4th house, looking at the astrological activity there, is indicating that it's not going to be a good time for real estate. And it's likely a time that's going to encourage relocations for many, as we've already been seeing that this is going to be a continuation because people are struggling to break free of restrictions. We're seeing a lot of migration occurring from blue states to red states, right? Like New Yorkers and Californians are moving to Texas and Florida. With Saturn sesquiquadrate natal Jupiter in the 4th house, people are having to really assess if they should stay or go, because the blue states are getting harder and harder to live in. And I'm sorry to say, if you're in a blue state and you think it's going to get easier, buckle up. This energy that I mentioned, Saturn sesquiquadrate natal Jupiter in the 4th house, it is forcing people to assess, honestly, soberly, maturely assess if mere patience, strength, and willpower are going to be enough to sustain you living there over the long term. Is it going to be worth your while? If you wait this out, are you going to be glad you did, or are you actually going to suffer more losses over the long term? Because definitely leaving is going to cost you something, right? But it's temporary. So you having to weigh this out, and I think a lot of people are going through that thought process the last half of the year. And mind you, during this time, we have, highly sensitive, intuitive Neptune opposing the U.S.'s natal midheaven over the next 11 months. So this is bringing in an element of chaos and confusion within the homeland, within the United States, and regarding homes, belonging, sense of belonging, It's bringing up insecurity issues for many concerning real estate, concerning, this 4th, 10th house axis of my home versus my career. And for different people, that's going to be different things. So there's a lot of weighing going on with this. And this energy over the next 11 months is bringing forth a crisis of some kind that forces revaluation of your sense of direction, and yes, possibly relocation for many, because many are feeling compelled by this energy to move due to out of control circumstances. And a lot of them, because of the Neptunian influence, are feeling very unclear and unable to make clear choices. Whatever ends during this time might be necessary for you to find your own inner security and foundation and not let these things define you. So, right, if you're in a place and you can't get the income there, or you've got the income but it's being swallowed up by cost of living, inflation, taxes, regulation, and you're looking at it like this is not sustainable, well, it may be necessary so that you decide, I've got to put an end to this. I've got to take another course of action. Realize Neptune is going to be in the United States 4th house for another 14 years. So you're not getting out of this. None of us Americans are getting out of this anytime soon. And during the same time, Pluto is in the 2nd house, bringing a change of values and a change in our monetary system. And with Chiron in the 4th house for another 3 years, there are dependency issues, very likely, issues of being uprooted and struggling to put down your roots somewhere. We are likely, with this placement, going to see more homelessness or people in transition with housing, in between housing, feeling like I don't know where I belong. And with Jupiter in the 4th house over the next 10 months, this is, on the positive, helping you to increase your sense of security, find, a home and land if you want to, and have more generosity with family if that's what you want. But on the downside, it may also very likely magnify these issues for correction. There will be opportunities there for you to surround yourself with support, but you got to do it. And over the next 8 months of Jupiter trining natal, the United States natal ascendant, and sextiling the United States natal Uranus, this is going to help expand people's social spheres of helpfulness and guidance. And that's going to lead people to make changes to solve problems, even if it means taking on more risks. Now, moving on to the next theme, mental and physical fog. This has a lot to do with what's going on with the media, communications, consciousness, the information warfare that's been going on, polarization within our country. And I don't think the objectives are very clear, definitely coming from the authorities, which is adding to confusion among the people. With Saturn in conjunct natal Neptune, for a good portion of this year, we've been in that energy since March 6th of this year. It will continue into January 20th of 2023. So expect during this time of the second half of this year, and we're already into it, expect that authorities are going to continue being unclear and unpractical, right? I mean, look at what's going on with us economically, yet they're signing us up for foreign aid that we can't afford, foreign entanglements that we cannot afford, defending other people's borders, when apparently it is not being afforded to defend our own borders, okay? Very unpractical, very unclear as to why. This is, you're right, very illogical energy, what we're talking about here. And some are just going to be unable to cope with this. Some are going to become overwhelmed by this. You are likely going to see more people with this Neptunian Saturn influence dealing with more depression, disappointment, pessimism, and be on the lookout of physical issues. Remember, I said physical fog. Oh, there's physical problems going on with increased disease and illnesses becoming very likely, but people not sure where these rare occurrences and mysterious illnesses are coming from. Gee, I just don't know. Going into the astrology, when you look at these energies in terms of body astrology, I will say that it's likely vitamin D will help. Anything that, boosts your immune system, like eating for immunity, is going to help. Also, having to deal with nutritional deficiencies linked to lack of iron, lack of animal proteins. Is it any wonder we've been hearing a lot about food shortages, and particularly pushing a shift towards plant-based meat alternatives, which on the surface sounds nice, but the more I learn about what they're putting in those, and again, I can't really talk about it on here. I talk about it on my uncensored platforms, but you're going to see this coming up with mysterious illnesses, lingering fatigue, allergic reactions, and people just don't know what it's about. On more of a psychological level, I think we're going to see people dealing with a fear of stepping into their personal power and their own personal authority and personal autonomy. The advice during this time, strengthen your gut health, strengthen your nutrition, eat for your immunity, eat nutrient-dense foods, get quality sleep, honor the food sensitivities, recognize and honor the food sensitivities you have, and eat iron-rich foods. Even if you're vegan, there are healthy, plant-based iron supplements out there on the market. But whatever is going on with you, try to get to the root cause of it rather than, these Band-Aid issues, this Band-Aid approach that we have here in America with our conventional medicine that's not really good at preventing disease, right? We've also got a lot of changing going on within our thinking and within our communicating during this time frame with Saturn in conjunct the United States natal Mercury. And this is challenging communications because of differences of opinion. And you're seeing that the authorities are changing their messaging as people are changing their interpretation of it, right? As people are waking up, they're having to recalibrate their messaging. So it is a time when we could see arguments, breakups over these arguments resulting where some people are just having trouble seeing the bigger picture of what is going on and what has been going on over the last 2 years. We will likely see more loneliness and depression and isolation. I'm not certain that it's going to be for the same reasons as it was over the last 2 years, right? But more likely because of insecurity over people being wrong or being duped, and people's worldview being humbled, having a lot of pride. So I'm seeing this taking the shape in various forms where you have some people are waking up and they're realizing, but they don't want to admit it to their friends and family. They have too much pride. They don't want to hear, I told you so. I'm seeing other people coming online who are dealing with injuries that we can't talk about on here. But they're very humbly saying, listen, I feel deep regret over this decision and I'm still grappling with it. Please be gentle with me. I'm still going through this difficult process. But then, of course, you're getting other people who just refuse because they cannot deal with the false paradigm being shattered. Unfortunately, what this energy is telling us, Saturn in conjunct natal Mercury, which started March 23rd of this year, by the way, will not go away until February 5th of 2023. People's thinking is going to be challenged. It is being challenged. And the people who are unwilling to see the higher perspective, the fuller, bigger perspective, are going to have it harder as the years go on when Saturn opposes or conjoins Mercury, especially if they persist in wrong choices based on false narratives and beliefs. So this brings me to this topic of, these 8th house matters, death, darkness, drama, okay? This is where we get into issues of mortality rates, taxes, shared resources, who can I trust, spiritual warfare. And with Lilith going through the United States natal chart from July 9th of this year until June 28th of 2023, let me tell you, we're talking about another year of security issues in the homeland here in the United States really being amplified, okay? Because we've also got Lilith in Cancer conjunct the Sun in Cancer coming up. So this is bringing out a lot of disillusionment. Beware of controlling underhanded tactics going on, things behind the scenes, in the dark realm, in the shadows, right? Because the people who have the ability to weather this next year are going to have deep inner security. This is going to make us focus on reconstruction. It's a death rebirth cycle. And what's going to be key is this tenacity towards transcending trauma. The themes that we're likely to see during this time is dramatic life or death issues. I'm sorry to say, facing difficult endings that catalyze movement in a different direction. On the positive, this is going to open the door for radical change. Deepened intuition, inner knowing, inner security, and removing untrustworthy people from our lives and potentially from unseating them from seats of power. This is about facing inner demons. And I'm saying this individually and I'm saying this collectively for Americans. We have to look at why we have liars for politicians. It's because we like being lied to. We have to face the shadow side. We have to deal with why we have people who are selling this country down the river to foreign investors. It's because we've been selling ourselves and our children down the river for $1. We have got to face our own inner demons, individually and collectively. This is a time to use the suffering to constructively reshape our lives rather than destructively define it. Yeah, that's going to be a challenge because overcoming painful loss and pessimism is not going to be easy. And there are a lot of people who are not mentally, physically equipped to do it, particularly after the last 2 years of the BIO warfare that's been going on and the PSYOP that's been occurring in this nation. So the challenge here is use the intuition to move through this darkness and go after what we desire as a country. And I think most of us, if we get real brutally honest with ourselves and drop these, parties and politicians over principles, practices that we've had, and we just start looking at what are the principles. I think most of us can agree, freedom. That's where it's at. But beware that during this time, people are going to engage in extremes of bottling up and exploding cycles of this due to poor coping. Now, June 8th through September 5th, we've had Ceres transiting the United States natal chart's 8th house. So that's put another energy there, focusing us again on reconstruction on a psychological and spiritual level, trying to heal things. And that is helping to assist us in clarifying the goals, letting go of superficial relationships. Whether this is, people in public office, these fakers, these rhinos, right? Republican in name only. They've got the badge, but they're not that. It's all a front. It's all a fraud. It's all showtime, political theater. And even on an individual level, whether we're looking at our work life or our private lives, okay, as Americans, we are moving towards more worthwhile, substantial connections and opportunities. The challenge is in confronting our fears and phobias and dealing with the death and grief that is very real and very present. Now, July 4th through August 19th, we have Lilith Susky quadrate the United States natal moon. So this could be a very emotionally reactive time. And when I get into July's astrology, which I will soon put out on my alternative platforms where I'm not censored, I'm going to talk in a lot more in depth about what's going on in July, okay? But let me say that this is a time when you're probably going to see people's shadow sides coming out, their darker sides, okay? And it might become more obvious if somebody, just expresses these repressed emotions through some kind of fit of rage that you didn't see coming, or sadness or addictive behavior. On a more subtle note, people who are maybe in a healthier state of mind would express this energy through communicating their vulnerability and the need to be nurtured in relationships. But watch out for this. It's going to be really, I think the energy will be the strongest August 1st. And then Lilith will square natal Saturn, the United States natal Saturn, July 29th through September 13th. It will be the strongest August 26th. And so this is a time where people's expression of themselves is in some way clashing with social norms. There will be the opportunity for each of us to hold true to ourselves, our inner convictions, even if people turn against us. It will be an opportunity to refine our communication skills and to readjust or reestablish boundaries so that we can move past conflicts with more awareness. But the challenge with this energy is that a lot of people are probably going to be feeling a loss of personal authority, personal autonomy, and people, again, who are not as strong psychologically or physically are just going to accept other people bossing them around about their own autonomy, their own inner authority, their own sovereignty. This is a time where you might be challenged and accepting that people have the right to direct their lives in the way that they wish. So try, if you can, to channel any anger that comes up during this time constructively. I think if you just look at all of these energies combined, everything I've said here about, Lilith going through the 8th house, Ceres going through that 8th house, Lilith aspecting the United States natal moon and natal Saturn placements, this is going to leave people feeling like they are not getting what they want. And with the north node going towards the 5th house with these retrogrades, a lot of people looking back on, why is this not working out? Why am I not getting what I want? What happened to the American dream? How did this become a nightmare? And people becoming angry with the exchange, right? That they got into debt, right? Many people got into debt with student loans for what? A good job that never came or never paid, or even if it did paid, was swallowed up with, taxes and inflation. And people are now starting to react with the Mars return, which I'm going to talk about next. And it's going to get probably very ugly. Okay, let's talk about what's going on with this Mars energy affecting global warfare, foreign entanglements. With Mars retrograde in Gemini in October, and we're having, right 2 days prior to that, Mars return for the United States, there is going to be some feeling of things slowing down. And really, it's been going on at this rate for how many months? Because we've been coming into increasing retrogrades since May. And so this slowing down energy is very frustrating, especially for Mars and Gemini. Something possibly regarding communications will blow up, and in the 7th house, it may involve war, alliances. And this Mars retrograde, by the way, gets 3 passes over, so something's not working. Something needs to get redone or recommended. Something is having to be redone, or it's not getting through. Okay, there's no action, forward movement on it as intended or desired. And with Saturn in the 10th house during this time and the moon in the 3rd house trine Mars in the 7th, there is some kind of reaction to government control pressure in favor of more freedom. With Mars in the 7th square Neptune in the 9th, there's something with ideals that seem to evade. People going after something that they can never get a hold of. And I think that's where the frustration is. And with Mars return in Gemini, there's some kind of unfocused, scattered anger. Maybe this impatience of, I want to do it all now, but I can't. I'm getting this feeling energetically of you having to prioritize, you having to pick what's most important to you. And it's hard because there are things that you don't want to pick. And I'm hearing bad choices. So this could also bring about some kind of teasing energy where people think they're going to get what they want, and then at the last minute, no. And then they think they're going to get what they want, and then no, you're not. And that just builds and adds to the frustration that's already there. So during this time, Saturn is just exiting the 2nd house and is on the 3rd house cusp. And while Jupiter is retrograde in Pisces in the 4th house this is around October 30th, with Chiron and Aries in the 4th house, people's expectations are getting deflated. There's probably been a lot of letdowns with all this energy. What they've invested with Mars in the 7th house into, I don't know, houses, lease contracts, mortgages, things like that. Massive problems due to inflation, overvaluation, people losing houses, people feeling unfortunate and disenfranchised. I'm very sorry to say. And, honestly, I'm looking at what experts in the real estate industry are saying, and they're forecasting the same thing. It confirms the astrology. Now, on the October 30th, there will be a moon in Capricorn transiting the second house. This is very interesting because, like, even on Halloween with the moon in Capricorn in the second house, it'll be conjunct Pluto opposing the sun and part of fortune. And there will also be Lilith and Pallas in Cancer in the 8th house. So all of this combined brings this very out of control feeling. And realize that some of these energies are going on they're carrying over well into December, the end of December. So with Mars retrograde in Gemini, 25 degrees in the 7th house, and Mars is 21 degrees in Gemini in the U.S. natal chart, it's almost like a Mars return. People are having to ask, what actions are we going to take over the next 2 years? Yeah, it might have to do with contracts between the U.S. and other countries. It might have to deal with the international community, warfare, military force. We could see a lot of war talks going on, people going back on these decisions or contracts, or rewriting these or revising these contracts, and things going on with legal contracts, right? Legal commitments from earlier this year. So think about whatever happened during this most recent Mercury retrograde, May 10th through June 3rd, is possibly going to also come out during this time of late October to late December, the last 2 months of the year. The public will probably during this time realize what had been going on behind the scenes, plans, shenanigans that were being made from May 10th to June 3rd. And we were none the wiser of it because of Neptune and Pisces in the 3rd house with Saturn and Aquarius there as well. None the wiser, but oops, starts coming out during Scorpio season. And with this Mars return in the 7th house, are we going to find out that our government signed us up for foreign entanglements, foreign aid commitments, global governance agreements that we were not even made aware of? We were not even consulted on. It was never even taken to vote. Whatever it is likely going to come out the last 2 months of this year. Another theme that we're dealing with the last half of 2022 is an intense shift of values, intense changes within our monetary system because of the United States having its Pluto return. And remember, we had the first hit of this back in February 20th. There's 3 hits of this total this year. So we're going to get the second hit, July. The third hit will be December 28th. And we will have one final hit next year in October. But I will talk about that more later. The impact overall of this is probably not likely to be fully realized until year 2027 with the United States Uranus return. And at that point, people are going to start adding it up. They're going to start connecting the dots. And we're like, oh, remember when that happened back in 2022? And then that happened in 2023. Oh my gosh, it's very catalyzing energy. So it culminates to this crescendo, this point in 2027 where people are still not getting what they want. Things still are not lining up. And I'm sorry to say there's probably a lot of fighting over resources. And I don't know why. I mean, intuitively, I'm sensing a lot of looting going on. So beware. Because this could be in person, which, again, we're already seeing a lot of that out in California with people just walking into stores and grabbing stuff because the laws there have been changed. So they're not going to prosecute anybody who steals under, I think, $700, all right? And I've even seen recently out in California, a group of probably, 50 maybe teens walk into, I think it was a Macy's, and just do a group looting of Macy's in broad daylight, and nobody stopped them. So it could be stuff like that, in-person looting, but also online with cyber warfare. Now, when we have the second hit of the Pluto return on July 10th, we're going to also have the sun squaring the United States natal Saturn. And this could leave a lot of people in the country, feeling, a lot of Americans feeling unlucky, depressed, held back. There's something with that. Then July 5th through July 9th, you pair this energy with Pluto. People are feeling maybe cornered during this time. We've also got Mercury in Cancer, which is in detriment. So people can't seem to communicate about what they're feeling. The feelings are being repressed. And Mercury is really, unhappy here and can't talk about it, and maybe just simply sitting back, absorbing the conflict without actually processing it in a clear way. Lilith goes into the 8th house in Cancer with Mercury in Cancer in detriment. So there's definitely anger here about shared resources, but again, people not quite talking about it constructively. And with Mars in Taurus also debilitated during this time, transiting the 5th house, June 28th through August 2nd, people's energy level has really tanked at this point after coming out of Mars in Aries. People are probably really stubborn about things. And then with the United States natal Mars-Venus conjunction being squared by Neptune, there is a desire, but the action towards it is being muddled. During this time as well, Moon in Scorpio is transiting the 12th house, just days prior to opposing Mars, which is going through these 11th and 10th houses, all right, demanding where is what I want. I do feel like this kind of smoldering energy with this. And you got Neptune on the IC conjunct. People are confused. They don't know what to ask for. They just know they're not feeling supported. And with Saturn retrograde in the 3rd house in Aquarius, conjunct, Moon a few days prior, people having the ability to articulate their wants is in some way restricted. There is this element of pessimism. But in terms of actually getting some solutions to their frustration, it just seems to evade them. The restrictions are actually causing a lot of frustration. Pallas is also conjunct Saturn retrograde and the Moon, people are trying to plan their way out, but cornered. And there's a lot of emotional insecurity about authorities derailing any plans that people make. People also may be resorting to escapism during this time from the pressure. And with the Sun in the 8th house, there could be a lot of acting out of the shadow side, as I mentioned before, acting out of the South Node from July 2nd to August 12th, where people just want to run and hide. There's some kind of reluctance to openly fight. Escapism during this time just seems easier, especially with the Moon in Scorpio. People are trying to figure out, well, how can I plan and prepare for this? But they're at odds with this desire I just want to feel better. Can I just feel good? The positive energies at this time have to do with increased psychic intuition and insight if you will just tap into it. And you're okay with not feeling good, okay? But you got to brace yourself, because a lot of people don't want to see the truth because they don't want to feel uncomfortable. Cancer energy wants to feel comfortable. Cancer energy is sensitive, and you got to be able to deal with the sensitivities to tap into the good stuff. But if you see the truth of the situation, you're probably going to see a lot of people who are trying to get over on other people. Poor stealing from poor. Not understanding who the real thief in the night is. You're going to probably see people trying to bulldoze to get what they want out of others. And so if you look at this stuff during this time, you've got to see, what is the stripping away revealing? Are you ready to emotionally release what's uncomfortable? Or must you maintain control at all costs? Control of your comfort zone. Control of what's familiar. Do you have to maintain this control, or are you willing to acknowledge Pluto constructively versus being suspicious of everyone being out to get you versus Neptuning out? Because those are the options here, it seems. And I think the advice is use intuition over logic, because Mercury in Cancer is not going to make sense. Things are not going to make sense during this time. And so tap into that intuition and that insight, as ugly as it looks or feels. People are probably going to have some mental sharpness on an intuitive level, okay? And if they tap into that, that's going to help them realize their goals and see where the opportunities lie. During the second hit, let me say, because the second hit occurs July 10th. But later on in the month, we have a lot of explosive energy coming up with the North Node Mars Uranus in Taurus. This is a triple conjunction that a lot of people in the astrological community have been talking about from the beginning of this year. It's on the 6th house cusp, which is disrupting daily life as we've known it. Say goodbye to life as you've known it if you're an American. Also, I'm going to say, with this in the 6th house having to do with health, does this have anything, and Mars there, warfare, does this have anything to do with biological warfare? Also, does it have anything to do with transhumanism? Because with Uranus there, it has to do with technology innovation, radical innovation affecting the mundane everyday life in the 6th house. And it can also be something hidden in plain sight. So there's a duality with this energy, as with any. There could be people rebelling to get back to their everyday life, get back to the way it was pre-COVID. But also with Gemini, here in the mix, there's some segmented aspect where people are maybe at odds with the transhumanism agenda versus individual bodily autonomy and sovereignty over the next 5 years. And this is not going to be an energy that is, easily recovered from. We will be dealing with this over the next 5 years up until United States goes into their Uranus return in 2027. So the problem is people don't understand what's going on. It's being hidden. We've established this early on from, 3rd house, what's going on in the 3rd house with communications, media, Saturn and Aquarius, Neptune and Pisces. And again, going back to this current energy of Uranus and the technology, all right, impacting people's everyday lives, 6th house, people don't understand that a lot of the technology development is going on behind the scenes we're not even aware of, in black ops paid for by black budgets in our government and the military. So there have been rumors that the technology is actually 50 years ahead of what we're aware of. They're capable of doing things we cannot even fathom. And there's definitely a hidden element here that doesn't entirely get unveiled or understood until maybe another 5 years from now. Now, as this conjunction on the 31st tightens into August 1st, I think people are standing up for themselves. They are realizing hidden enemies, self-sabotage. They are reflecting on their inability to get forward movement despite following the rules and doing what they're told, yet feeling impotent in life. And this could leave people feeling very impulsive, particularly with this Mars-Uranian energy conjunct. Very impulsive. And Mars is going to be in conjunct natal, the United States natal ascendant. So it's power struggles from July 15th through the July 19th. And Mars squaring natal Mercury, United States natal Mercury, exact on August 1st. I'm really seeing provocation here. People feeling like they are being provoked. And with the sun in the 8th house from July 2nd through August 12th, people are acting out maybe obsessions as a way of coping. There's a lot of mental conflict and confusion during this time, and some people intellectually withdrawn because of Mercury in the 4th house, where they're re-examining, reconsidering, making plans. This conjunction is square Mercury, by the way, in Leo in the 9th house, so it's trining Neptune, lots of intuition, but logically lost. Things are not adding up. The communications are off. What you see is not what you get. And there is probably a lot of logic that you need to get caught up on because, information is being withheld, left out. It ain't adding up because you're not getting all the information. And until you do, I'm just hearing learning curve. Some of you have a lot of learning to do because you have taken the attitude that you're too spiritual to be involved with this stuff, not realizing it's all interconnected. It's all interconnected. You try not to be about politics, but politics is about you. And now people are understanding. And until you really understand, all you have to go off of is your intuition. Now, on December 28th, very end of this year, we have the 3rd hit of the Pluto return, and that is going to be accompanied with Mercury and Venus in Capricorn in the 2nd house, okay? So I actually think people are having trouble effectively thinking and communicating their way out of the pressure they're feeling with, the 2nd hit during July and into August. But by the end of this year, people are going to find their words and they're going to find their gumption. All right. This is fierce communication. This is not caring about feelings in Capricorn. Like, we're going to have it. We're going to talk about it here. And with the sun in Capricorn during this time squaring Jupiter and just going back into Aries with Chiron and Aries there as well towards the end of the year, this is not really deep, but it's calculating. It's calm and cool. Where I think there was more calculating behind the scenes going on during July. People have gotten through. They've thought it up, down, left, and right. They've intuited. They have felt. And it's showtime by the end of this year. And so, we've got also Pallas on part of fortune, 21 degrees in the natal chart, opposing all the Capricorn, Venus and Mercury. So people are getting angry. And I mean, as I was looking at this, I heard that song, Bitch Better Have My Money. That's the vibe I'm getting off of that. This is a no BS approach with Capricorn here. And people are back on task. Like, okay, whatever topics were backburnered during these retrogrades earlier in the year, enough of that. Okay, we're done. Let's get back on topic. And during this time, the moon in Pisces in the third house is going to be conjunct Sarah. So again, there's still more of this intuitive, insightful energy supporting us as Americans, but it could also be very scattered by information overload. And yes, always you're going to get this duality with the energies where some people are overwhelmed, they're overstimulated, they're over emotional. It's just depending on how you're tapped in, where you're at an energetic level, where you're at psychologically, emotionally. There are going to be some people who are going to drown in this energy. They're going to be like, well, I know what I feel, but I don't know what to do about it. And other people are going to be like, I know what I'm feeling and I know what I'm going to do about it. Get out of my way. I got a mountain to climb. And I think the only concern here is, with the sun, the way the sun is placed and aspecting could be a lot of me, and bossing people around. And again, maybe it's high time for that. But with the placement of the moon in Pisces in the third house, very sensitive communications, very sensitive. And again, with that sun in Capricorn, maybe you just don't care, damn it. Do not care about your feelings. It could go either way, right? Transiting Mars will be retrograde and conjunct natal Uranus and natal descendant during this time. So beware also of transactional relationships where people aren't getting what they want, and that could get explosive, where people feel a lot of pent-up energy that could result in unpredictable explosions of repressed anger, fireworks. Beware of violence in relationships, cold, calculating. And again, I'm also seeing that it's not necessarily fiery energy, but more electrical energy. I'm seeing possibly cyber warfare. And as I mentioned before, looting out in the streets, cyber attacks, in America, where massive change is going on. And we've got one more hit of this, like I said, in October 2023, which I'll talk more about it then. In summary, let me say, I think that we are going to be seeing a lot more homelessness. I'm sorry to say that. We are going to be seeing a lot more migrations from areas that are very expensive and highly restrictive to areas that are not. We're probably going to see rent going up, big changes going on with the economy, with the banking industry, with the currency. They are probably going to try to shift us onto CBDCs because the dollar is collapsing. It is a death rebirth cycle in Pluto. And be aware that the authorities are going to continue to manufacture scarcity. You can't trust what's being said in official narratives and media. There's probably going to be a more artificial scarcity manufactured through shipping and tourism and airline industry. In the housing industry, probably a lot of expansive benefic energy. If you are positioned well, you're going to have to address some pain points, maybe leaving places that you don't want to leave and stepping more into your own sovereignty and going to places that support you in your own sovereignty to actually put down roots that benefit you. Stock market, I don't think is going to, it's just, I'm hearing Russian roulette with that. Be careful. And I think collectively Americans this year, with everything going on with the 8th house, Cancer, Lilith, Ceres, 7th house as well, Americans are going to probably get, hopefully, a holy righteous anger towards misappropriation of our resources. It's going to look like a curse, but perhaps in the long term, it's a gift if we use it wisely. In the meantime, please subscribe and activate the notification button if you want more of this, because I put out weekly political tarot on here. And I do go live if you're more into relationships. I go live on tarot relationship readings every full moon. And don't forget to come visit me over on my free speech platforms, where you can also get a lot better content on these topics of astrology and the economy. Let's stay in touch. Let's connect again soon.
The revolution won't be televised, government been telling lies. If you're not with us, you better step aside. Witnessing a genocide, everything is centralized. The food that we consuming, they spraying it out with pesticides. Easily identify the sheep and the snake, the real and the fake, giving us a reason to pray. I'ma make my own choices, a voice for the voiceless. They trying to destroy us, avoiding the poison. It's all pointless if you don't have a purpose. If you read the verses, you'll know who we versing. Government can tell you what your worth is, look deeper than the surface. They don't even want you researching or asking questions. We all being tested. Shh. Shut your mouth and comply, that's the message.